Pretty soft introduction. All right. Hello, this is Luke, and I am the presenter today. And show for those out there, I didn't come in with a great introduction. There it is. So if you missed it, that was it. That was the introduction. I'm gonna do. I originally titled the presentation like "What's the problem? What's your problem?" kind of thing. That will be the focus, but I also like what were you thinking? Um, because the whole objective today is to take a look at thinking, thought process, kind of what we think, and then how it kind of works. Because we base everything we do on that thinking, and so sometimes we get down the road of decisions or problems, and then we realize like maybe we were started off in the wrong path. So my resume of sorts. Um, Therapist for 13 years. Currently, I work in a couple different places. My primary population now is actually in San Francisco, so I work online. Clearly, I don't travel down there. Which is fun. It's fun to work. COVID did have some fun times because it dismissed all the regulations during COVID. So therapists licensed in one state could technically see anybody anywhere. They just kind of said, if you can see a therapist, see a therapist. And then went back, and so I'd gotten licensed in about 5 states: Kansas, Nebraska, um, Nevada, Arizona, and California. And so it's really exciting because during COVID, I was able to work with just different populations and people. And I found California, their ideas or perspectives on mental health were really pretty exciting because they don't wait until they get to a crisis to seek mental health. A lot of them plan on seeing a therapist. It's like a booster shot. It helps give them reflection so they can carve out for themselves. And so you really get to work through a lot of stuff when you do that, not even necessarily like concrete black and white, but just as like you, as it does all of us, you get somebody outside circles to just talk about something with, get some feedback on, or how does your action in that correlate with something else? And so I don't know, I just really found that pretty exciting. So I work primarily out there for a company in California. Every time I tell them I'm in Nebraska, they always give me some weird look because I mean they're in the city, right? With LA, San Francisco. So when I say Nebraska, they just immediately think rural. And they're not necessarily wrong, but a lot of them actually, because San Francisco, if you know anything about that area, it's pretty. If you want to put a title on liberal, it's pretty left. If you want to go there, and so they see me and they think probably I have a huge Donald Trump flag hanging outside my house, and I'm just all excited about everything. But no, it's pretty cool just to get that. Worked in addictions and treatment centers. The VA do have another degree in seminary. I have a master's in theological studies. Um, and I did primarily to help with religious trauma and moral injury. We all have a spirit. People can, argue that all you want, but there's elements of mental health. It's not just thinking, it's not just your body. You've also got spirit and soul, all these aspects incorporated. And sometimes when, if we overlook any one area, that could be the area we need to go into. Written a couple books, a children's book, that was fun last year. And then I've done a TED talk before, so I have high expectations for my abilities. Let's see if I can nail it. All right. So if I talk much, it'll get boring. And so if there's participation, it's a lot more fun. And with a few, it's going to be more participation. It's a fun time, though. I think so, anyways. So allow yourself to think and stay open to a different perspective. we all want to say we're open-minded. No, being closed-minded typically is not like a good definition. We shut off, we're prejudiced or judgmental, and so we miss a lot of life when we're closed-minded. Being open to a different perspective is difficult. In a lot of ways, it's impossible because we all have a framework. We see the world. That framework has been established and reestablished a million times over throughout our whole life. In the brain, it would be like neurological pathways through different experiences. And so when you truly get a different perspective, it can be kind of confusing, even frustrating. Like your mind wants to fight it or figure out ways in which it won't hold up. And so if we go with a different perspective on something, sometimes we just leave a little bit confused, a little bit frustrated. And that's good because it's our brain telling us this isn't the framework we live by. And so without rethinking, we stay the exact same way. And even when we take in new information, we still put it through our own framework and we get the same results. We get new information, same as read a new book, self-help book. We put it through our filter as to how it needs to apply, and it's the same results. And that's why a lot of things, when you read them or come across them, TikTok, YouTube, you're like, oh man, that's the thing. I'm gonna use that. But you end up doing that the same way you've done everything else. We all have this cyclical familiar pattern. And so it's good to get new information. New information can create epiphanies. Epiphanies change our perspective. And a lot of times when people say, oh, I get it now, right? That's, you have an epiphany. It changes everything. And often I say in therapy, whatever it is that you're going through, struggling with, have a hard time with, it's all about perspective. If you just shift perspective, if you can just see it differently, the whole thing can change without trying to solve the whole. Okay, appreciate it. All right, so um, so without rethinking, we say the exact same way. Let's go there. Objectives are nice. Objective keep me on topic. And I can go off topic, but it's because I find it useful. So I'm going to stick with that for the most part. So the objective, develop a better understanding of thinking and on what we believe is wrong in our life. We all go through life every day and and I'll get to this a little bit more later, but we do two things. We observe, we take in objective data, this room, chairs, people in this room, and then we evaluate. Our mind does two things, it observes and evaluates. And we often live in the evaluation of things, which, as I said earlier, is skewed by your life experience up until that point, right? So answer the question, how can we know we're living a life worth living and what is worth the pain? That's one of the objectives. We want to ask ourselves, how do we know we're on the right path? How do we know what we're doing today will actually be the thing we want to do? Because you, and this is in terms of people who go to therapy, you're living life and something happens for whatever reason, and you end up coming to the conclusion of, oh, I'm going to talk to somebody, right? Usually it's something negative. Maybe the courts, maybe your wife, husband, they tell you, you need to go talk to somebody, a friend, 5 friends, 10 friends suggest, you need to go talk to somebody. Something happens that gets your attention. Pain is very attention getting. It's hard to deny. And so when you have this realization of, I'm going to go talk, you got to realize like some problem was identified, right? Even if the problem within you is something you don't see, but other people tell you. Like I have many people, like I said, in California, they'll show up to therapy and I'll be like, all right, what was the situation that got you here? And they'll say things like, I don't know, I have my friends that go to therapy, so I thought maybe I would try it out. Okay, there is no identified problem we're working on. So we might just talk about their life for a session or two. And eventually they will come around on some things. They're like, oh, I guess I do kind of struggle with this, or, this is an area, but something they didn't even realize was. So it's always good to just like let people ourselves through our experience come to a conclusion as to what it is we're identifying as the problem versus being told, oh, you have a clinical diagnosis, that's your problem. That's a whole nother thing. I'll get into that more. Pain without purpose is suffering. So when I ask the question, what is the point to all this pain? I'm talking about life, which is inevitably painful. Whichever path you choose, whatever crossroads you're at, whatever way you go, you didn't go the other way. And the other way, missing that and that opportunity could have been the thing. So then you think, what is worth it? What's worth the pain? And so it's good to ask ourselves then, what is the problem or what is going to be worth it? It's funny, college stereotypically it's a huge decision, or military, huge decision made at the age of 17, 18 years old. Your life, and how are you going to invest in that now to be able to do that thing? Nobody at 17 or 18-year-olds should be given such a decision, which is why a lot of times we make these mistakes and come out at 20s and going back to college or military or making a change. But the reality is, if we're asked that question at 35 or later in life, we have so much more awareness of ourselves or the world or our perspective that we might not even do the things that we would sign up for early on if we knew the cost, the true cost. The 17 and 18, there's a lot of ignorance there, and so when you make these decisions, it's kind of based on that ignorance. Because if you really think it all the way through, whether it's marriage, a career, like if you're like, man, am I going to want to do this in 25 years? That's a big question, right? And so, because especially unlike, decades before us, our ancestors, if you will, our generation before us even, we're not working jobs 30 years anymore, 40 years. There's too much opportunity and too much change. AI is showing us that change can happen within a matter of not decades, generations, but years. If you were a computer engineer 10 years ago, you've got a solid setup job. No, they're getting laid off in the masses. California, the layoffs of these high-level computer engineers are just mass layoffs. So you realize this thing these people have built for their whole life, and a lot of them, it's wild. I work with a decent amount of Indian population. And so in India, a lot of it is very academic based. Everything you do is based on that achievement. And the family will invest everything into like the firstborn. Again, there's anomalies, but traditionally the firstborn achieves high academia, all intended to get a full ride scholarship to an Ivy League or some great school in the country, which then typically goes into like engineering or something computer. Anything outside of that's typically deemed not so favorable or even looked down on. But the problem with that is now you're finding, and you come over and you get a work visa, and you get sponsored by the job you work at for your work visa, that if that job has a layoff, you now at your PhD credentials possibly, or have 60 days to get a new job before you have to exit the country, right? I don't know about anybody else, but 60 days to get a job, from application to going through the interviews to getting hired and getting sponsored. And so just to put it in perspective about, jobs and work and big decisions, if you knew that possibility as a youth, you would have probably chose otherwise. But you just keep following the path without too much. So inevitably there's going to be pain no matter what you choose. There's no job, my job online, especially with if anybody's messed with AI or GPT, I have plenty of people that spend copious amounts of time on ChatGPT, and ChatGPT knows them well enough. I had a guy yesterday, he asked ChatGPT, what do I talk about in therapy? ChatGPT knows him well enough to be able to identify what a good therapist can do, and that's identify blind spots. So through his frequency of questions, all the questions, the time he has, all that data we can't even fathom, he was able to get poignant questions that to help him identify areas that he didn't even know would have been the thing that I perceived within the first questions were more of a thing. Because he came in thinking relationship problems. So his problem was my marriage. He kept talking. But if you were to put out the time, if you laid that whole session out on a map, we only spent this much, if anyone could see, let's say 10 minutes on the relationship, and just by natural conversation, he went into his job. Long description, long hours, this and that, don't know what I'm gonna do, I make money here and that. And so and then ChatGPT told him, you need to work on your identity with your job. It's too concrete. And so when the job's threatened, then he feels threatened. So you put an AI face to that GPT, the AI component, a more handsome AI face, if you can find it, and you're going to have yourself a therapist. HR companies are already using HR or an AI person to interview people. So you go into a room, you sit down, this screen rolls up with an AI interviewer. And so there's no more, sometimes you can maybe do some schmoozing, right? Personality in the interview, kind of, well, you don't have the best connections, but he seems like a good team player. AI is going to be like, well, maybe not, maybe I'm underestimating it, but it's going to be like, what answer did you give? How much pause did you give? Did you look nervous? I mean, it can assess everything. It's all data. Just another funny story about this, because I have the time, and I think it's hilarious. We cut a tree down in my backyard, and in that tree, there was the rings, my dad's like, oh, how old do you think that is? I'm like, I don't know, Dad, let's do this AI thing. And to my dad, he doesn't even use a computer, so he doesn't even fathom the science fiction. So I take the picture, ask ChatGPT, how old is this? My dad's holding it right like this to the side, up against his body. ChatGPT sends four things back. The first one, it says, it looks like this tree is about this old based on the rings. Second one says the bark's pretty thin, seems like this kind of tree. Maybe it doesn't have the most moisture, whatever. Third one says something else, but the fourth one says, based on the holder's shirt, it's most likely this is located in a Midwest region. My dad had a plaid shirt on that he was holding, right? I have a guy, he's a client, he's a PhD researcher. So he's the guy behind the scenes, right? Putting all that together. I tell him this story, and he says, it shouldn't have done that. It shouldn't have done that. So therefore, it's doing whatever it is it assesses to do, which is, it was a horror movie waiting to happen. This is the beginning of Terminator 4, I swear, because it shouldn't have done that. We pan out. But just mind-blowing stuff. So things are changing quickly. So there's going to be constant pains. To avoid pain is going to just to not live life. And so the acceptance of pain, and we'll get into acceptance in a bit, is inevitable. So pain is a choice. Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. In the book Man's Search for Meaning, if you have the opportunity to read it or listen to it, I know YouTube has free versions. Listen to about the first 100 pages are describing the worker camps, which he was at, which are different than the concentration camps, because concentration camps, they would just kill you, whereas the worker camps, they just work you to death. And he describes these conditions. But the thing that's so astounding is, at one point in the book, Viktor Frankl is like laying on the ground, half naked, didn't get his rations for the day because they didn't produce enough, fatigued, just broken. For all he knows, his family's dead because they all got separated. They didn't have cell phones and social media to check in on each other, so you're just assuming they're probably dead. And he's laying there and he realizes they can do all this stuff to me, but they can't take my inner thoughts. They can't take what I care about unless you give it to them. So Viktor Frankl decides to do what he does best, and that's to care for people. And within the concentration camps, he actually reports about how he started to care and provide for other people, even share his meager rations with those that didn't get any. And he found it became more tolerable, even realizing you can live for what matters to you in any situation. Anything that life throws at you, we all have the choice to live for the thing that matters the most for us. And that thing isn't always the job or finance or the end result. That thing can be the reason we do what we do. The business guru, tycoon, Simon Sinek has a good TED talk, and he talks about your why. Why do we do what we do? And that really is the basis as to anything we do. Why do we do it? And if we're honest with ourselves and practice that honesty, and do some of that diving and maybe talk to somebody else to help reflect, we can get down to a core reason why we do what we do. And that why can be produced anywhere you go. If you wake up tomorrow, whatever it is that you built to that point is gone, though you can mourn the loss of things. Grief is a natural process that we all have to go through, and let's not pretend it didn't hurt. But we can still live for our deeper purpose, which we all have. We all have it within us. That's why we're here today or get out of bed at all. We all have some reason we do what we do, and not